So today we're going to be talking about query letters. This is something that a lot of you may or may not need, but I will say that as an adult writer, the likelihood that you're going to want to publish and going to be interested in traditionally publishing is much higher, so I figured it'd be a good thing to go over. Now, just to let you guys know, the next meeting will be on May 25th. From 8 to 9, as usual. I really would love to see all of you guys there. Thank you so much for your interest and for watching my videos. I do apologize today if I'm a little off. I do have a cold, but I'm going to try to do my best to continue to go on with the lesson. Alright, so, query letter. It may seem kind of daunting, especially because even if you write a perfect query letter, you will get rejected several times. Most of the time. Very few people get accepted on their first time. Most of the time, as being an author, whether you have a perfect query letter or not, rejection is imminent. However, the reason this is so important is because the more your query letter stands out and the better your query letter is, the more likely that you are going to be successful. Doesn't guarantee success, but it definitely encourages the idea of success. So, first thing that's going to help with this is formatting it like a letter. It's not just a bullet pointed list. It's not just a here's all the facts about my thing, are you interested? It's literally a letter. And keeping that in mind, you're going to address it to the person you're talking to directly. So if you're going to an agency to find an agent, address it to the particular agent that you're looking for. If you do not know the specific person, for example, if you're giving it to a publishing house and you're not sure about who the editor is that you're going to be working with, you can just address it to that publishing house and say, and say something like, editors of Shadow Mountain, or something like that. But if you know the specific editor you'd like to work with, for sure, address it to them. Absolutely. Editors, even if they're working at a publishing house, like being sought out directly. They really appreciate the extra effort. Now, the next thing that you're going to want to do is, if you are going to give a comparison, give it right up front. So, literally, first couple sentences. I would even say the first sentence, but first couple sentences. And when I say comparison, I mean title of your book is title of another book meets title of another book. So, for example, one of my favorite comparisons is The Unwanteds by Lisa McMann. On the front of the very first book, it says Harry Potter meets Hunger Games. That gives a very distinct image, and on top of that, it really is Harry Potter meets Hunger Games. It's a very dystopic, dark novel, but it all has to do with magic and has this beautiful, colorful magic system. And as a result, it does help us give that kind of idea of where we're going with it. If you're going to give a comparison, absolutely give it up front. And I would probably say don't do the Unwanteds thing. If you're going to compare it to some books that your company that you're talking to has published. Or if you're not going to compare it to some books that they have published, compare it to books that are slightly less popular than Harry Potter. Not like obscure books that they have no idea what they're talking about. But maybe don't compare it to Harry Potter, because then it sets their standards too high, and when you don't meet those expectations, then it just falls flat. The next thing that you're going to want to be aware of is be careful not to hype it too hard. So you want to definitely hype your book, and you definitely want the first 2 paragraphs, generally you want it to be 3 paragraphs. First 2 paragraphs, you want it to be hyping your book. You want it to be like, this book is really interesting. However, you're not hyping the book. That's why you want to be careful of hyping it too hard. It's because you are not hyping the book. You're letting the book speak for itself. You got to make sure that when you're describing this book, you're describing it in a way that you would like the back of a book cover. And that way you're luring them in the same way you would lure in a reader. So you're going from, oh, this sounds good, to, oh, this sounds so good, I really want to read this. And you want to do the same thing with an editor. The back of your book blurb is going to be a lot shorter than a query letter. However, that's what makes the query letter so nice. You basically take what the back of the book blurb would be, You make it even a little bit more elaborate and a little bit more like hinting towards things that you think they might like, especially if you have a specific publishing company. So for example, if your publishing company is into darker fantasy, maybe lean hard on the dark fantasy elements of your novel. Make sure that you emphasize that. The next thing that you're going to want to do is give a description of your novel. So when I say give a description, I mean more of a classic back of the book. So the first part might just be like a snippet from the novel that makes them interested. And then the second paragraph, you can definitely go more book blurby, like so-and-so is a small-time girl from Indiana, but what she doesn't know is that her parents are both witches, or something like that. That makes you far more like, oh, interesting, now I understand more about what the first paragraph is talking about. With that, it helps give an idea for the editor of what they're getting into and what they want out of your novel. And especially what you can bring to the table. If they're not interested in your book description, then they're going to toss it out. You gotta make sure that it's very compelling and very interesting. Probably have a handful of people go over it. However, when I say handful of people, I don't mean your family and I don't mean your friends. Sorry, but they are going to be far too kind to you. You have to be giving your book description to people that you know but you don't really know. So for example, a coworker might be okay, or if it's your cousin's in-law or something like that. Like, make sure it's someone you trust and know isn't going to steal your work, but at the same time, do not do direct friends and family. Direct friends and family will almost always be too nice to tell you the truth. In my opinion, they should tell you the truth, but 90% of friends and family do not tell you the truth. Most of the time they will tell you, oh yeah, it's fabulous, and then when they talk to someone later, they'll be like, well, there was a giant plot hole, but I didn't want to break their heart and tell them. No! That's not good, which is why you need to make sure it's someone who you can trust, but isn't a direct friend or a direct family member. That way they have much more of an unbiased opinion on what's going on. The next thing that you're going to want to do is give a more exact description of the novel. So, this is where you get down to business, really. And if I'm being honest, there are two different ways to do this. You can either do business up front and then let them into the novel, or you can do let them into the novel and then business. I've heard that both are equally acceptable, and I was actually trained to do business up front and then give novel description. But then I've also heard a lot of people say they were trained to do the opposite. So I think both work. I honestly would say also research your publisher, because your publisher will probably have talked about what types of things they like and don't like in query letters. As a result, you can kind of cater it to them. Now, I know this is a lot of work, but ultimately if you get accepted, it's a lot less work than trying to do everything yourself. With that being said, when you go down to business, whether it's in the front, in the first paragraph, or in the back in the last paragraph, you gotta make sure that you give them what they're looking for. So you gotta give a genre, you've gotta give a word count, and with your word count, make sure you look up what they want. Some people want it round to the hundredths, some people want it rounded to the thousands, some people want exact down to the 6th word. Like, if it's rounded to the 1000th, you might say it's 50,000 words. Whereas if it's rounded to the 100th, you might say 49,500 words. Or if it's rounded to the, or if it's exact, you might say 49,566 words. Or something like that. So with that, you're also going to want to give the exact novel genre. And when I say exact novel genre, I don't just mean thriller, I mean subgenre too. So for example, if it's a thriller mystery, or if it's a thriller romance, or if it's a supernatural fantasy, you're going to want to make sure you include both. If it is just one genre, that is totally acceptable, but you gotta make sure it's just one genre, because you don't want them jumping in and saying, oh, it's a thriller, and then all of a sudden it has a romance, and they're like, I just wanted thriller. That's gonna, once again, put them off, and you don't want to do anything that is gonna put off your editor/publishing opportunities/agent. Query letters are acceptable for all the above. The next thing that you're gonna want to do is you're going to want to elaborate on your character, elaborate on what's important about this book, and you're going to elaborate why you think you'd be a good fit for being published with them. And by you, I don't mean you as a person, I mean the novel. You are introducing the novel. Basically, think of yourself like the teacher who's introducing the new kid in class. It's not about, well, I love roses and so does Bessie. No, it's Bessie likes, Bessie does, Bessie is. It's all about the new kid, right? You're doing the same thing. You're being the teacher introducing the new student. You are the author introducing your novel. They honestly don't really care much about you. What they want to know is your novel. However, they do want to know a little bit about you so long as it's relevant. If it's not relevant, don't include it. For example, if you want to say, I'm a fine connoisseur of hats, or I really love hats, that's not relevant. Unless they are a hat shop maker, not relevant. And even if they are a hat shop maker, still borderline. You want to make sure that whatever you're talking about is relevant. So, for example, if you have an associate's degree in history and it is a historical fiction novel, that would be something worth mentioning. Or if you are if you have a degree in creative writing, that would be something worth mentioning. If you have been published with other publishing houses before, but you didn't like what they did, that would be something worth mentioning. That way they can look at your prior publishing history and say, okay, you sold about 400 copies, maybe you're worth picking up. These are all things to consider, and you got to make sure that you are making the best impression, and the best impression means that you're showing what's relevant. And the most relevant things are going to be what relates to your book. That's it. If you want to give a little bit of description about yourself, just make sure it's short and sweet and that you keep the business up front. So when introducing yourself, remember, business up front. Then if you want to be like, oh yeah, and I have 5 kids and I'm married, that's great. But you definitely want to keep it short and sweet at the end. Do not want to put it up front. The next thing that I'm going to mention is say why you picked them. Be sure to say why you picked them, especially if you did pick them deliberately, because editors and agents and publishing houses love to be like, oh, they picked me. It helps them feel special. And if that helps them feel special, then they're more likely to read your manuscript. Doesn't mean they'll take it. Again, just because you have a great query letter doesn't mean they'll take your manuscript. But, on the bright side, it does increase the likelihood that they'll read your manuscript. Query letters are an introduction. If they don't like the introduction, they won't even bother to read the manuscript. So the thing about this whole lesson is making sure that they'll at least read your manuscript. Doesn't mean they'll accept you, but they'll read your manuscript. Now, the final and last thing that we need to talk about is formatting. You got to make sure it's formatted exactly the way the website tells you. One thing off and they will throw it in the trash. And I mean that. I honestly didn't have this experience personally, but I have talked to loads and loads of editors who have talked about the fact that if they see Calibri font and they ask for Times New Roman, immediately go in the garbage. If they asked for 14-point font and you did 17, garbage. You gotta make sure that it is in the exact format they ask for, and if it's not, they're gonna throw it away. If they don't have any formatting descriptions, then this is when you go to classic MLA format, MLA 8 preferably. So Times New Roman, 12-point font, double spaced. Generally, that is a good, safe bet. Doing anything else makes it so it seems a little squirrely, and they may not be totally for that. Calibri is also okay, I would say, but generally, I would say Times New Roman 12 points font double spaced is your best bet. Last point that I'm going to make, and probably the most important point, it has to fit all on one page. And by one page, I mean not double-sided, single-sided one page. The second a publisher has to flip the page to keep reading your query letter, they're done. They don't have that much time, unfortunately. I wish I could say this was different because I think it is so harsh. But it's true. If it does not fit on a singular page, they're going to throw it away because they lose interest. They have think of it like a business resume. With a resume, you all want it to be single-sided, fit on one page. Why? Because your employer only has a certain amount of time to look over your resume before they're going to move on. And the same thing with the query letter. They have 2 minutes tops to read your stuff, and if they're not interested, it's going away. And it's the same thing here. As a result, you want to make sure that it fits all in one page, single-sided. I'm going to emphasize that again. Even one sentence over to the second side of the page is going to bug them. You want to make sure it fits all on one page. Absolutely. That way, they feel like you aren't taking up too much of their time and taking advantage of them. They feel like you're just getting to the point and you're getting down to business, and it feels far more professional to them. Alright, thank you guys so much for listening to my writing lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, and if you need anything from me, please also feel free to comment down below if you want me to help you with anything. And don't forget that on May 25th is our next in-person writing group. I'd be more than happy to give you editing tips and tricks specifically for your novel and feedback for your novel if you bring it to in person to the American Affordable Library Writers Club on May 25th. Thank you. Bye.